Welcome everyone again to our Elohel Gauntlet previews. Today, we're going to be talking about North America, and since there's so many teams from NA, we're going to make it a bit easier on our guest experts and not overload one person. So we've split it up into the respective divisions of North American contenders, and today we're going to be talking about North America East with special guest, the NA dinosaur himself, Boop. Now, for people who might not know you, Boop, why don't you give us a bit of background about yourself?
Well, I got my start doing some content. I think you guys might remember the Boop of the Week. I think lafon was saying the boomers of Overwatch might remember this. Back in Contender Season 0, I did the top 5 plays and the Boop of the Week. Then I joined BGG right after that, met Ham Tornado, my current casting partner for North American Contenders, then casted South American Contenders with lafon as well. And after that, we got the call up to North America Contenders, and we've been doing that for the last 3 seasons.
Alrighty, speaking of NA Contenders, for those of us who might not have been able to keep up with North America East for this season, be it for time zones or otherwise, give us a quick rundown of how this season went, who the best teams were in the regular season, and what was it that made them so strong?
Well, the best team during the regular season was Golden. Atlanta Academy was able to achieve the Golden season. They were by far the best team in, honestly, both regions, even including North America West. And Atlanta Academy did not drop a map throughout the entirety of the regular season. However, everyone below them from 2nd to 8th was actually a lot closer than one might have expected. The parity in North America East outside of Atlanta Academy was pretty evident, where any team could really take down another team at any given time. I mean, our second seed going into the playoffs was Grunto Esports, followed by Uprising Academy, 2 teams that, you know, the previous season were not necessarily ones that you might expect to finish in the top 3 of their group. We also had some noise from Phase 2, and our representative going to Korea almost didn't even make the playoffs. Gladiators Legion left it down to one map, one Havana map, and if they did not win that map, they would have not even made the playoffs and not been in South Korea. But that's just a good SparkNotes version of saying, hey, it was pretty close outside of Atlanta Academy.
Speaking of Gladiators Legion, as you kind of mentioned, they are one of the 2 teams heading to Gauntlet from NA East, Atlanta Academy and themselves. Talking about the Gladiators, they almost didn't make it, as you mentioned. How did they kind of improve towards the very end of the season and then show up in playoffs?
Well, I think you can't talk about Gladiators Legion without saying 2-2-2 roll lock, man. They came into the regular season, I think, expecting a more GOATS-heavy meta. They also had a new off-tank player, Emil, replacing Bishu. Those are like clown shoes to fill, is what I like to say. And Emil didn't quite live up to the expectations that I think some people had for Gladiators Legion as a whole. And throughout the season, it was very evident that them not having a Sombra look was really detrimental to their cause. And they just kind of played a little lackadaisically throughout a lot of the regular season. They definitely tried to prepare for a meta that ended up not really happening. But then the glorious 2-2-2 rollout came about in the playoffs, and everyone just got a little bit better. Everyone got a little bit more confident. Water got a little bit more consistent, and Emil really showed up during that playoff run. There was a self-destruct on Rialto that was a map-winning ultimate, and that propelled them into the finals. And without that consistent improvement throughout the playoffs, I don't think they make it into the Gauntlet in South Korea. But again, I honestly believe it was 2-2-2 roll-lock that really propelled them into the Gauntlet in South Korea.
Now let's dive in a little bit deeper with Gladiators Legion and talk about the different parts of this team specifically. And I want to start with the tank line, because you did bring up Emil and how he did a relatively good job in the playoffs, but while on paper, Stand 1, Panker, and Emil seem to be a relatively strong lineup when we talk about Tier 2 tanks, these guys have been struggling as of late. Do you think that they have the flexibility and maybe the hero pools to pull off the Orisa Sigma meta we've been seeing?
Maybe. I mean, Emil didn't have the hero pool to play Sombra, and we just talked about that. That was really detrimental during the regular season. And now going into the Gauntlet, seeing Stand 1 on Orisa just doesn't feel right? It's like these Reinhardt players that were able to make such big plays, huge shatters every now and then. Stand 1 is a big reason why they were able to make it into the playoffs. He had a game-winning shatter against Square 1, who they took Havana off of in Week 1, and that was one of the reasons why they were able to make the playoffs a little bit, 6 weeks later. later into the postseason. And Stand 1 is a playmaker, but he's going to be on Orisa most likely. And Emil didn't really show that hero pull off during the regular season or playoffs, really sticking to that diva in general. And so that's definitely a question for me and a lot of people for them going into the gauntlet. When you're thinking of the tank line, though, Stand 1 is a playmaker. He can have the ability to get some good hot combos in there as well, but in the end, they are wildly inconsistent too. Stand 1 used to be a very, very consistent tank, but during the regular season was a little bit more inconsistent, cleaned it up during the playoffs, and it's all about getting that polish in South Korea.
Speaking of consistency, I think moving to the DPS makes sense now, and Gladiators Legion have one of the flashiest DPS players, and I think in all of NA Contenders. In Water, we've all been dazzled by his Genji, highlights. But speaking of, do you think he has, again, that topic of flexibility, do you think he has the ability to go over to some of the other heroes that have become sort of the flavors as we're headed to Gauntlet?
Well, I think the key word there is ability. He has the ability, but does he have the wherewithal to stop going for these hero plays over and over again and throwing team fights? I think Water was arguably the most wildly inconsistent player in this group, not just on Gladiators Legion, but in the group. I remember in playoffs, there is a couple times with May that he would get a couple picks, and they'd be huge pits, and he'd be able to get his team back from the brink, but then the very next play, he'd throw out an ultimate no one was ready for and throw the fight. Sometimes Legion was able to overcome that and still win that map, but other times they might not be as lucky. So Water has the ability to flex on a Doomfist. He has the ability to get onto these other characters like Farah and make some noise, but the dude shines bright and fizzles very, very fast occasionally in these games, so he's got to clean it up. He's got to play consistently. There are so many times where he would go for these plays and his team just wasn't quite ready for it. So the question is, does Legion follow Water, right? When Water goes for it, does everyone follow, or does Water have to play back a little bit more with everyone else on at Legion? And that's definitely the question they have to answer when they do go to the Gauntlet.
All right, let's get to the real meat of NA East now, though, with Atlanta Academy. Now, you mentioned their golden season earlier, and I think it's no secret that with Gator quite literally smurfing on this roster after being one of the strongest Sigmas in the playoffs of the Overwatch League, as long as Hawk can maybe fill this Orisa role, that this tank line should be fine, and we know that they have the DPS to compete as well. So my question isn't so much, where do you think we can expect this team to strive, but more so, where do you think the chinks in the armor might be? Where might this team falter?
Well, I think where they might falter is in their own heads. We all see it. Gator likes to strategic shimmy over dead bodies. He has the hubris of someone who I'd love to play for me, right? I like it when you BMing the opposing team. They know how to get into the opposing team's head, but sometimes they go a little bit too far and get into their own heads and start playing a little sloppy. And so if their own hubris doesn't take advantage of them, then I think they're going to be a pretty good bet to have some success during the Gauntlet. And the reason why I say that is because there are plenty of times where I think Atlanta could have just really wrung their opponent out and just suffocated them, but they kind of let the other team back into it by playing around a little bit too loosely. And so they can't do that when they're going into the Gauntlet, but at least they're going in. They're already going to be in the finals bracket, and they're going to respect the Korean teams for sure. It's not going to be the same as in North America where they were never pushed, right? So the other question I have is, what's going to happen when they're on the brink of elimination? These players haven't felt that in 2 seasons, right? This is a team that's only been in the finals. They've gotten beat by Fusion University, but that's it, right? And so it's all about them going into Korea, respecting their opponents, playing cleanly, not getting their own heads in the way, but also at the same time, Hawk on Orisa just doesn't sound very good to me, right? It's all about Hawk was the diva player. He was the only one that was consistently getting 2 or 3 man bombs. You guys all know the Kaka rule, right? And so when you think about Hawk, he was a big reason why Atlanta Academy played so well. He was able to eat ultimates. His defense matrix usage was bar none the best that we had in this group, and he was arguably the MVP for the season. And so now that he's not going to potentially be on that diva, that is definitely a question, but part of me thinks that they might still keep him on there. We'll see when we get to the Gauntlet, but that's definitely a question that I have as well. Is Hawk is such a good diva. Are you going to go around that, or are you going to go over what Gator did on Sigma during the Overwatch League? It's definitely a question that I'm excited to see the answer for.
Speaking of questions I'm excited to hear the answer for, I want to talk a little bit about that cockiness sort of angle that we just mentioned earlier, right? Teams that play with that edge, that play on that thrive rather on that idea of making the opposing team get upset at you. Do you think if they go in and show respect, too much respect to the opposing teams, that could also be harmful to them?
Oh, that's a very good question, lafon. Now that you bring it up that way, I think it could, because you don't also want to lose their identity. I'm totally cool with a strategic shimmy, but when it's appropriate, right? Not every single time. And what I mean is just like there would be times where Gator would hop in on Winston and everyone would kind of all in, and just because, right? Because they were just trying to body them and spawn camp them when they could have just taken a couple steps back, let the payload move a little bit, and get a better defense a little bit later. And so that's more what I'm speaking to when it comes to their hubris. Is they start disrespecting the other opponent's play, and then they start just making stupid mistakes, and they're dumb mistakes a lot of the time where Gator kind of just hops in and feeds, right? But when he's not doing that, this was the best team in North America, bar none. And again, they had the golden season, so this is very nitpicky coming from me. But in the end, I don't want them to lose their identity, and I want them to go ahead and, get some tactical crouches in, get some strategic shimmies in there as well. But that's where it needs to stop. It can't go past that to where it affects their play.
All right, now let's talk about the Gauntlet itself. Now, due to the format and North America having won the Atlantic Showdown off the backs of our martyr Fusion University before they went to Korea and didn't have as much fun of a time, Atlanta Academy are coming in as the #1 seed from North America, and they get to skip the initial group stage altogether and proceed straight to the knockout bracket. Gladiators Legion, however, not going to be so lucky. They're going to begin in Group B, where they face off against Team Envy, also from North America, but the West Division, Genji Esports from Korea, and LGE Huya from China. Now, this group definitely isn't what I would call a safe group for Gladiators Legion, but to advance to the knockout bracket, all they have to do is win one match in this stage. They got to beat one of those three teams. Do you think that they have a shot here? And if so, whom might they get that win against?
So I think Gladiators Legion, if I'm being completely realistic in terms of their expectations, I think they're probably going to finish 4th in this group based off of the information we have from the regular season. Even though they were able to make some noise in the playoffs, in the show matches, XL2 were able to bring them down. And the current meta, like they had a little bit of Doomfist sprinkled in there, and we're questioning who's going to play Sigma. There's just too many questions for me to confidently say these guys are going to win one of these games. But the good news for Gladiators Legion is maybe another team is thinking that exact same thing, and then they've been able to grind. They were one of the first teams to go to South Korea. They're going to have their fun out of their way. They're going to be able to focus on winning games, and so maybe a team like LGE Huya comes in, super underestimates them. Gladiators Legion exceeds expectation and is able to upset them and move on into the next bracket. But that's, I think, the only way that really happens for Gladiators Legion. It's definitely going to be an uphill climb, but hopefully they're going to be able to do it.
All right, well, from there, the double elimination bracket will begin regardless of whether or not Gladiators Legion make it or not. The knockout bracket will be 10 matches long, and at the end of it, we're going to have our first ever Overwatch Contenders Gauntlet champion. Now, Boop, gonna put you on the spot here. Who is that champion going to be?
Oh, Mr. Paul, Mr. lafon, this is so hard for me to say because my heart and my head tell me different things. My heart tells me Atlanta is going to be able to take it because I gotta represent the region, and if any team that's outside of the Korean teams is able to do it, I think Atlanta Academy is going to be that team. But my head has to say you gotta pick one of the Korean teams. It's between Element Mystic or Runaway, and you gotta get to the boys in Peak. I think Runaway are gonna be able to take it.
As a Runaway fan myself, I like that choice from your head there, Boop. But it's going to be exciting to see. I think this is the first time we're seeing sort of that representation of Tier 2 play against each other, and I'm really excited to see the stylistic matchups, right? Because we've said this for a long time. Different regions develop differently, and to sort of see that all put together and see who comes out on top is going to be very exciting for me.
Yeah, and it's going to be super exciting for all of us. Like, are we going to see mirrors of Doomfist the whole time? Are teams that just don't have a Doomfist player going to struggle throughout this? Or are teams going to be able to innovate? Let's all remember the reason why we have GOATs is because of an open division team, right? So all of the innovation isn't just in Overwatch League. A lot of it happens in Contenders. Think Clockwork as well. When we saw it in Overwatch League, that was a Contenders team comp. And so there's definitely an opportunity to see a little bit of that innovation going into the Gauntlet from any one of these teams. It could be Talon, it could be Gladiators Legion. We don't know yet because we haven't seen these games, but that's definitely something that I'm incredibly excited about, is how these teams are going to counter Doomfist. Are they going to play it? Are they going to run those mirrors? Are we going to see something completely new? We won't know, but that's why I'm so excited to see the Gauntlet.
All right, well, the action all kicks off October 9th for the Gauntlet, but before we get out of here, Boop, go ahead and tell our audience where it is that they can find you online.
You can find me at twitter.com/Boopasaurus Rex and on North American Contenders.
All right, short and sweet. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, there is a button for that down below. And if not, leave us a comment. We're always looking to improve. But either way, make sure you stay tuned to Elo Hell Esports for more Overwatch content.